They laughed at me the night I broke. Not strangers, my own brother. He looked me dead in the eyes, called me nothing, and everyone around him laughed like it was true. That was the moment something inside me snapped, the moment I realized that to Ethan, I was never a sister, just a convenient punchline. My name is Madeline, and this is the story of the night he finally learned who he was mocking. I had grown used to the quiet life I carved out for myself in Santa Fe, a life built on red dust hills, old adobe walls, and the kind of stillness that settles into your bones when you finally stop running from the world. Evenings were my favorite. The soft gold glow on the clay surfaces, the scent of cedar drifting in from the porch, the gentle hush that falls over the desert as the day exhales. It was the sort of peace I once believed I would never need, yet somehow clung to with both hands. I hadn't planned on leaving that comfort. Scottsdale belonged to another chapter of my life, a chapter I had closed without ceremony. But the moment I saw Ethan's name on the envelope, inviting me to celebrate his new home, something in me paused, not because I felt wanted, but because our distance had grown so silently wide that even a simple invitation felt strange in my hands. Years had pushed us apart in small, quiet ways, misunderstandings that never healed, conversations that never went deeper than the surface, silences that lasted longer each time. I drove out of Santa Fe as the sky deepened into a copper sheen, the sun flattening itself against the horizon. The highway stretched ahead like an unanswered question, smooth and endless, inviting and unforgiving at the same time. I wasn't sure what waited for me at the end of that road, only that facing Ethan again felt like opening a door I'd kept locked for reasons I never said out loud. And as the miles slipped beneath my tires, I couldn't shake the sense that something long buried was waiting for its chance to rise again. Ethan's new house was lit up like it wanted to be seen from space. Warm bulbs wrapped around the pool, shadows danced along the patio walls, and the kind of crowd he loved loud, polished, self-assured filled every corner. The moment I stepped inside, I felt that subtle pressure of unfamiliar eyes assessing me before slipping on polite smiles. It wasn't unkind, just detached, like I was an unexpected variable in a carefully curated evening. Ethan swept over, offering a quick squeeze of my shoulders that passed for a greeting. Look who finally left Santa Fe. His tone carried an undertow only I heard. Before I could respond, he steered me toward a group and began recounting stories, years I'd been away. The way no one could ever pin down where I'd gone, how I supposedly lived tucked away from the world. The laughter that followed was light but sharp. Ethan loved the attention, basking in it like a spotlight he'd earned. I held a small smile, but inside, the familiar ache pressed against my ribs. I'd forgotten how quickly he could turn me into entertainment. Then something shifted. A man appeared behind him, tall, steady, with the kind of presence that didn't need to be announced. His eyes didn't skim the room. They scanned it. Ethan brightened and clapped him on the shoulder. "This is Connor Hale. Just got out of the SEALs." Connor reached for my hand, but the moment he saw my face, his grip slowed. His expression tightened, not in recognition exactly, but in the uneasy jolt of someone connecting dots they didn't expect to find here. Connor didn't shake off that hesitation. He stayed close enough to hear Ethan's stories, his posture alert in a way that didn't match the mood of a backyard celebration. When Ethan drifted toward another circle of guests, Connor leaned in just enough for his voice to meet my ear. "Santa Fe must be quiet. You been there long?" The question was simple, but his tone told me he wasn't looking for small talk. Then the real shift came. A group nearby launched into tales about their work with military contractors in the Middle East heat, outposts, energy sector missions. Someone mentioned a specific operation protecting critical infrastructure, and suddenly Connor's head snapped toward me. His eyes sharpened, as if something he'd only suspected now made perfect sense. He walked off to refill drinks, but paused before returning. The look he gave me wasn't social curiosity. It was recognition from another world entirely. When the party grew louder, I stepped outside for air. The glow from the string lights stretched across the stucco like soft brush strokes. Connor followed, stopping several feet away. He didn't speak right away, just watched me with a certainty that made the night feel suddenly smaller. Then he said it, low and steady. "Ghost Falcon. Is that you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence can carry truth better than confession. And that was when Ethan strolled out, catching only the phrase, none of the weight. He burst into loud, delighted laughter, calling out to whoever was nearest that I must be playing spy. Laughter rose behind him, but not everyone joined in. A few faces stiffened. Some stared at Connor, confused by his stillness. He didn't laugh. He only watched me, with the unmistakable look of a man who knew exactly what had surfaced. When I walked back into the living room, the party had grown louder, thicker, almost feverish. People crowded around the food table. Music pulsed against the floors, and Ethan stood in the center, retelling the moment he heard Connor say, "Ghost Falcon," as if it were the highlight of his night. Each exaggerated gesture drew out another burst of laughter. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, steady on the outside while inside something tightened, as if long-buried memories were being pulled out by force. The first disturbance came from across the room. Connor stood behind Ethan, his expression unchanged. His gaze locked on me. Not a hint of amusement crossed his face. His eyes held the tense stillness of someone who senses danger before anyone else smells the smoke. Then another presence slipped into the moment. A retired Air Force colonel moved closer, drawn by Ethan repeating the name too loudly. The colonel's face shifted tight, startled and far too knowing. He looked at me the way men look at classified files that were never supposed to resurface. Before I could step away, one of Ethan's friends brushed my arm, grinning like he owned the room. "So what did you do to earn a name like that? Or is it some gamer tag?" I turned, but he blocked my path with another jab about me disappearing into some imaginary online world. The words hit with a quiet sting. I didn't have to respond, because Connor did. His voice cut across the circle low, sharp, final. "If I were you, I'd choose my words a lot more carefully." The man froze. The group fell silent. Even Ethan's smile cracked at the edges. And for the first time that night, I felt a thin shield rising between me and the mockery. I stepped outside again, needing a breath that wasn't soaked in laughter at my expense. The patio lights stretched soft shadows across the tiles, but all I felt was the old rhythm in my chest, the rhythm of nights spent between screens and maps. Not parties and wine glasses. Connor followed, stopping a few steps behind me. "I know it's you," he said, voice steady. "I thought you were gone." The words landed heavier than I expected. I wasn't sure if the ache in me was anger or something closer to grief. "He told me about the homicide last week, the one no one would read about. The man killed had once sat in the same briefings I had, part of the same coordination unit." A cold line ran down my spine, familiar as a scar. "Don't go on," I murmured. But he did. He watched me carefully before asking whether I'd noticed anyone following me. I didn't answer, but the tightening of my shoulders told him everything. Then Ethan appeared again, drawn by instinct more than intent. He looked between us, confusion giving way to something like worry. "What are you hiding from me?" I let silence sit where an explanation should have been. Connor's phone buzzed. He turned away, voice low. "I'm with her." A long pause. "Understood." He faced me again, eyes darker than before. They confirmed it. "The second target is still active." My heart slammed once, hard. I didn't need the name. I already knew the second target was me. When I stepped back inside, the noise of the party felt strangely distant, as if every laugh and clatter had traveled through cotton before reaching me. Connor's call still echoed in my mind, the weight of it pressing against my ribs. The second target was still active. I tried to push the thought aside, but people like us didn't get the luxury of comforting illusions. Hope had never kept anyone alive. Ethan stood at the bar, in the middle of another one of his stories. The moment he saw me, he stopped mid-sentence. His eyes followed me across the room with a confusion he didn't try to hide. The earlier smugness had thinned, replaced with something tight and uncertain. A familiar touch landed on my arm. My mother's old friend, a woman who had known me since childhood, leaned close and whispered that I didn't look like someone at a celebration. I looked like someone waiting for bad news. She couldn't know the details, but experience had sharpened her intuition, and I couldn't hide from eyes like hers. Just beyond her shoulder, I caught sight of the retired Air Force colonel. His gaze held the same weight it had earlier too, knowing. Too steady. He stepped closer and lowered his voice, telling me he'd heard the name Ghost Falcon years ago and believed the person behind it had disappeared for good. I didn't answer. He didn't seem to expect me to. He simply nodded. The way someone does when they finally confirm the suspicion they wish they hadn't formed. He warned me quietly that names like that don't resurface without reason. Before I could respond, Ethan broke into the conversation. Irritated by the secrecy he sensed but couldn't decode, he demanded to know why we were whispering during his party. The colonel turned toward him with a heavy, tired look and said that if Ethan knew what I'd done, he wouldn't be asking such questions. For once? Ethan had no comeback. His mouth opened, then closed. Swallowed by shock, Connor appeared in the doorway, scanning the room with sharp precision. He gave a subtle signal meant only for someone trained to see it. I walked toward him immediately. His voice stayed low as he told me someone from the old list was heading toward Scottsdale, and they didn't know why. I didn't need the rest. They were coming for me. The tension in the room thickened the moment I returned. It moved like a cold draft only I seemed to feel. Yet the guests kept laughing, oblivious, swirling their wine as if the air hadn't shifted. Ethan turned up the music, as if noise could force normalcy back into place. But I could sense the glances quick, curious looks cast in my direction. Something in me was tipping the balance of the evening, and they felt it even if they didn't understand it. Connor positioned himself near the back door, shoulders squared, every muscle prepared. The colonel remained where he could see me clearly. Everything about the room had become strategic. A sudden flicker of movement caught Connor's attention, a man near the side gate. Someone who didn't belong. The stranger stared at me for a single heartbeat before turning away. No one else noticed. But Connor moved swiftly, placing himself between us in a way that made my pulse spike. I barely had a second to process it before Ethan intercepted me. Voice strained. He insisted I was imagining threats and accused Connor and me of acting like we were trapped in an action movie. But his voice trembled. His fear wasn't for me, it was for the control he felt slipping through his fingers. Connor called me outside. His tone was clipped, urgent. He told me the follower had been confirmed trained, not civilian, and they didn't know how many others there were. He scanned the perimeter like he expected something to break through at any moment. He warned me I needed to leave before the night ended. Ethan rushed after us, arguing again, demanding explanations. This time, Connor didn't soften his tone. Deed. He told Ethan he didn't think I was in danger, he knew it. Ethan froze, blindsided by the certainty in Connor's voice. Then Connor's phone rang. The voice on the other end was loud enough for me to hear they'd lost sight of a second vehicle heading into the neighborhood. Connor's grip tightened around the phone. When he looked at me, the veneer of calm was gone. Madeline. They're coming here? The party raged on behind us. But the night outside had already begun to turn toward us, carrying a threat only we were aware of. The air inside the house felt denser by the minute, as if every breath had to fight its way out of my chest. Laughter still spilled from the patio. Music still pulsed through the speakers. But none of it reached me the same way anymore. I felt the shift, an invisible shadow, pushing closer, while the rest of the guests clinked their glasses without a care in the world. I stood in the middle of the crowded living room, certain that whatever was coming had already crossed some unseen threshold. Connor stepped forward, tension running through him like a drawn wire. His gaze swept every corner of the room, marking exits, watching faces, calculating distances. I knew the signs well enough. He was preparing to act in a way that would leave no doubt about what I used to be, and what he still was. Ethan tried to reclaim the spotlight, raising his glass with a grin too wide. He called out for everyone to toast to Ghost Falcon, delighted with the sound of his own voice, unaware that he was poking at something far beyond a party trick. Laughter exploded again. I didn't move, but Connor did. He walked into the center of the room, posture straight, shoulders squared, eyes never leaving mine. The colonel noticed first. He lowered his drink, stood fully upright, and watched with the solemn readiness of someone who understood exactly what was unfolding. Then the moment snapped. Connor faced me, his voice cutting clean through music and chatter, carrying across the entire room. "Ghost Falcon, ma'am," requesting confirmation. The laughter stopped all at once, as if someone had pulled the plug. A woman's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the tile. Ethan froze mid-breath, staring at the two of us like he'd stepped into a reality he didn't recognize. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I lifted my chin, meeting Connor's gaze with the steadiness I once wore like armor. And the room understood. The colonel straightened into a full stance. Two other veterans by the fireplace instinctively followed, spines snapping upright in muscle memory. They didn't even question. In seconds, the chaotic warmth of the party vanished, replaced by a silence so absolute it felt like a held breath. For the first time in his life, Ethan saw the truth he had never bothered to ask about the world I came from, the authority I once held, and the reason the name he'd been tossing around like a joke should never have been spoken out loud. Connor walked me out of the house, and no one tried to stop us. The guests who had laughed earlier stood frozen in their pockets of silence, suddenly unsure of what they had witnessed. For the first time all night, I felt the weight of their fear, not of me, but of the truth that had cracked open right in front of them. We stepped into the night air, the quiet so stark it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. We stopped at the curb, where the street lamps carved long shadows across the asphalt. Connor spoke quickly, urgency sharpening every word. "They intercepted the first vehicle, but we don't know how many more there are. You need to leave tonight." I looked back toward the doorway. Ethan stood framed by the light behind him, his expression stripped of every easy grin he'd worn earlier. He stepped out slowly, as if approaching a stranger. His voice rasped when he finally managed to speak. "Who are you?" "Madeline. What were you doing all those years, eh?" I drew a steady breath. I never intended to explain myself, and I didn't plan to now, not fully. But he needed enough truth to stop treating me like a story he could twist for attention. "All those years you thought I vanished. I wasn't hiding. I was doing work you never had to witness." His eyes flickered, confusion and dread tightening at the edges. He started to ask more, but I lifted my hand, stopping him before the wrong question formed. "I can't give you details. What I did doesn't belong to civilian conversations. But you need to understand this much. I'm not the shadow you've been dragging out for jokes." The words hit him harder than anger would have. His face shifted, draining of color. It wasn't fear of me that I saw, it was fear of the truth he never bothered to imagine, that his sister's life had been larger, darker, and far more dangerous than he ever allowed himself to believe. Connor stepped in, tension coiling through him. His voice dropped. "The second car's been stopped, but we still don't know who was inside. This isn't over." I nodded, already knowing what needed to happen. But before I turned away, I faced Ethan one last time. The porch light caught the uncertainty trembling in his expression. "I don't need an apology. I just need you to stop hurting me." He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He simply stood there in a silence I'd never seen from him, finally stripped of every assumption he'd ever placed on me. I left Scottsdale before the horizon even began to pale. The night still stretched wide across the sky. Connor stood at the curb as I pulled away, his silhouette steady in the rearview mirror until the road curved and swallowed the neighborhood behind me. I didn't know when I'd see him again, maybe soon. If the danger still lingered in the shadows, but tonight, distance felt necessary. The farther I drove, the more certain I became of where I needed to go. Santa Fe had become the one place where my heartbeat finally learned to slow, where the silence didn't feel like hiding, but healing. That was where I belonged now. As I crossed the state line, my phone buzzed with a message. "If you need support, we're here." C.H. I locked the screen and set it aside. I couldn't let the past reach out and pull me back in, not when I'd fought this hard to step beyond it. The sky warmed to a soft orange as dawn crept over the desert. The long stretch of highway unfurled before me, calm and endless, like a ribbon guiding me home. I rolled the window down, letting the dry wind rush in, carrying a sense of release I hadn't felt in years. Tonight, I didn't reclaim my power through confrontation or spectacle. I didn't need to. All I needed was the truth standing on its own. And sometimes, at this age, the bravest thing you can do is simply choose to walk away.